Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure to subscribe. This is a video talking through another analysis paragraph, and I'm just going to go through the steps that we've been talking about in class, just as a way for you to come back to if you are getting in the middle of one, you're like forgetting where to go with it next. This is already a written paragraph, and this is sort of me thinking through the process that was already written. You've seen this one before, but here's a little artifact for you to use if you're getting stuck at all. So here is my prompt. In pages 28 through 51 of Mice and Men analyze George's internal conflict considering Steinbeck's use of literary devices. So I'm already going to break up this prompt. It seems like there's two parts. One, I have to analyze the internal conflict and think about literary devices. So I'm going to turn both of these into a question. First, I have to analyze George's internal conflict. So in order to do that, I need to know what is George's internal conflict. Ooh. Internal conflict. And then, what literary devices does John Steinbeck use? And then I'm going to think about the connection between these two in my paragraph. And ultimately, what this means for the work as a whole. Because I know when I'm planning through my snap, the P points me to, it's pushing me to purpose or theme. So I've got to think about how this is connected to the world around us. So let's just go through this paragraph and see if I answer these questions first in my thesis. So here's my thesis. I'm going to highlight my thesis in blue. And I'll say somewhere here, let's see. I'll say right here, thesis equals blue. Great. John Steinbeck uses metaphors and imagery. Oh, wow. Already answered one question, right? I answered question number 2. To reveal George's conflict between a life of luxury and his bleak reality. Ah, okay, so he's conflicted between the fact that he's a poor man trying to just survive and this life of luxury that he witnesses from Curly and Curly's wife. So that's actually the answer to my first question. Answer to question 1, answer to question 2. Great, now I just have to prove it with evidence. Before I jump into evidence, I want to give some context. So, let's say context, I'm going to move this up. Context equals pink. I need a lead into my context, and when or after these conjunctions we've talked about are a great way to do that. So when George and Lenny arrive at the work camp, they enter focused on their present goal, but soon become distracted by the boss's wife. So the boss's wife, Curly's wife, has some connection to George's conflict, but I've led up to it with this context. Where they are, let's get somebody's mind to this place. So that's in pink. Notice I did not say on page 1, John Steinbeck uses a metaphor saying ... I provided context instead. So let's say beside context, don't say on page 1 or page ... John Steinbeck uses ... That's a no. Okay. Described as a temptress, it is not just her sex appeal that is attractive to George. What I notice about this sentence, described as a temptress, is an incomplete thought followed by a complete thought, meaning I've used a complex sentence here. And I'm going to use a lot of sentence variation throughout here so my sentences don't all sound the same. I wish I could do some writing on here, but I got to do everything in type. Okay, first piece of quoted evidence. Her fingernails were red. I knew somewhere in my thesis, imagery. It seems like I'm going to give some imagery about the way that Curly's wife looks here. But let's highlight this and say that we've got evidence for literary devices, and it's going to be related to conflict. So I'll highlight this half green and half yellow to say I've got evidence for both parts of my question. since this is going to be tied to the conflict and it's talking about some it's giving an example of imagery here. Notice that you don't have to say there's an example of imagery when it's when the text says ... Just give it. Assume that your reader knows what imagery is. Assume that people are smart. That's a good life rule. And she wears ostrich feathers of the same vibrant color, representing passion in all its forms. I'm actually doing a little bit of analysis of this imagery, the symbolism of this imagery here, representing passion, red associated with, romance and the riches of romance here. So this is technically evidence, but it's paraphrase evidence. It's not in quotes, but it is directly from the text, these ostrich feathers these red ostrich feathers. So this is actually evidence too for imagery and for the connected to the conflict. It should be connected to the conflict. Juxtaposed in a world of gray, I'm thinking about colors still and the contrast in these colors. George sees her attire and desires this drive and riches. Okay, so I'm talking about his desire, what he wants. So I'm doing a bit of analysis about the conflict. What is he torn between? Well, he wants, I said in my thesis, he wants this life of luxury. He desires this drive and riches, and that's what I'm getting out of this imagery here. Among other things. You know what I mean. Unless he reminds himself of his reality, okay, again, touching back to the thesis, he's torn between reality and riches, he will be seduced by an unattainable dream. Therefore, he repeats, remember frantically to Lenny, more as a mantra for himself. He warns Lenny to avoid her because she's a rat trap. Okay, evidence of metaphor. We set that up in our thesis. So I'm going to, again, this is involved in the conflict and proving that there's a metaphor. So let's see, green, and I'll specifically put this because she's being compared to a rat trap in yellow since that's a metaphor. Notice that we're proving with just these small quotes evidence for both pieces of the thesis. The devices should be connected to the other. If you're writing a setting analysis, the device should be related to the setting, unless you're just putting a supporting quote in. And he will corner them like the rodents they are. Use my own simile here. I'm going to put use of figurative language. That's going to be in, what color do we have left? Blue. Oh wait, no, this is already light blue. Let's say, it's navy. We'll make it navy. Like the rodents they are. George is aware of his place in this class system. Okay, here's the push to meaning of the work as a whole. Underline connection to theme and meaning of the work as a whole. Underlined. Let's move this up a bit. Okay, if I'm talking about systems of power and classes, this is a connection to a human experience, right? Like we all experience differences in power and classes. I'm gonna move this around a bit. So I'm starting to connect to the meaning of the work as a whole here. He's scavenging for work and bread while the embodiment of the wage gap, so the difference in what, the money that people make, stands before him in order to avoid succumbing to his oppressor. He retaliates in anger as he's reminded that he remains a mouse among men. Comparing him to a mouse, my own metaphor here, I'm using more figurative language. So, I've got evidence, I've color-coded it here, so I know I have evidence for both pieces of my thesis. It answers both parts of the prompt. I've connected to the meaning of the work as a whole. And the big thing I want you to remember is when you're stuck and you don't know how to introduce your next piece of evidence, give me some context from the novel. That's where you're summarizing and you knowing what literally is going on in the novel comes into play here. So you can go back through. If there's a piece that you're missing, like if you don't know where to go after your thesis, rewind this video, go to that part of this video and see how I'm doing it. Maybe watch it a couple times and then do it for yourself. And use this as a stem when or after said character does this, then this happens, and then start introducing some evidence to prove that your thesis is true. You've got some great examples of people who wrote paragraphs yesterday in the room, so also maybe look at some examples of a friend nearby. But I totally believe that you're going to kill this paragraph on Friday. Good luck, and subscribe.